Let's face it, in our busy lives, we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. In fact, according to the CDC, only 1 in 10 Americans are eating the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables each day, missing out on essential vitamins, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants. And that's where Balance in Nature comes in. Balance in Nature sources only the best produce, free from pesticides, heavy metals, and harmful bacteria. And Balance in Nature is the best fruit and vegetable product on the market. They use only fresh, whole fruits and vegetables inside each capsule. They don't use any GMOs, fillers, binding agents, or preservatives of any kind. You're getting real food, real science, real nutrition. I would never endorse a product that I don't use myself, and since using Balance in Nature, I feel more alert, I have more energy, my focus is sharper, and I feel great. Live life to the fullest and choose Balance in Nature. And guess what? PAS Report listeners can get 35% off the first preferred order. Start getting the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables you need by using code PAS at balanceofnature.com.
Welcome to the PAS Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The PAS Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to a bonus episode of the PAS Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and I had the pleasure this week of hosting 2 episodes of Blunt Force Truth with Chuck Woolery. Mark Young was on travel, asked me to sit in. It was a fascinating conversation I had with him, so I hope you enjoy this episode, and make sure to check out Blunt Force Truth Podcast. 2 great guys, Mark Young, Chuck Woolery, breaking down the topics, fighting the good fight. Check it out, and I hope you enjoy this bonus episode.
It's showtime.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard round the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host today, Nick Giordano from New York City. He's filling in for Mark while Mark is in Oklahoma going to see something on his bucket list before he dies. I can't imagine what is in Oklahoma that's on your bucket list, but what the heck, you know.
We play Where in the World is Mark Young right now?
That's right.
Or Where in Oklahoma?
Where in Oklahoma is Mark Young? Hey, Nick, did you listen to, it is Tuesday. We're a little bit early because we have to edit the show and get it ready to go and everything. So I was listening to Joe Biden address the United Nations, which is the most useless body in the world of politicians from all over the world. And I think everybody out there is in agreement with that. So I watched him give his speech. Did you watch it at all?
I did not. I was actually teaching a class, doing something far more important
Yeah, exactly.
than dealing with the United Nations.
Well, it was a diatribe on climate change and COVID. I mean, it was like the 2 C's. It's almost like Chanel, you know. It's like,
well, it's amazing that with everything going on, this is what he wants to focus on. That the fact that we lost allies because of what took place in Afghanistan, the debacle that occurred there, the fact that China is a growing power that is really something that we now have to pay attention to.
And the French, mon Dieu.
Well, the French are very mad at us because we cut a deal with the Aussies and excluded the French. Australia canceled the contract with the French that they had.
Well, it's an interesting situation because apparently, this is just hearsay. This is what I've heard. The Australians made a deal with the French, and then they were having cost overruns, and they were behind schedule, and they were building a sub that really wouldn't operate well in that part of the world. And so they came to us and said, and to Britain, and said, look, we need a nuclear sub. That's what we need over here. I mean, we're under threat from China. I mean, they're next door. They're going to come get us. So they cut a deal. And of course, Biden didn't call Macron and say, mon Dieu, monsieur, you've been cut out of the deal. And it just kind of happened, and he found out about it. And so now the French are all up in arms and baguettes and stuff like that.
Well, I understand why they got mad. I mean,
sure.
Listen, it's a lot of money on the table, and it creates employment within France. But, you know, it's one of those things. The French will get over it. This is what happens in international politics, even with allies. Yeah. They'll get over it, and they'll move on. France,
of course, they will. They're problems. We're more like them than anybody else at this point with the Biden administration, so they'll get over it. The other thing that I saw him say was very interesting. He said, people are struggling to find a job. My wife came running into the room and she said, "What? Are you crazy? Struggling to find a job? There are help wanted signs all over the United States."
It's mind-boggling that they come out there and they're pushing this idea that there's no jobs available when literally like every single employer out there is screaming that they need people to work, that they have all these spots that are open. And we're not talking about horrible minimum wage paying jobs. We're talking about good paying jobs that can't be filled. And we're seeing
that Joe Biden wants to fill by making solar panels.
Well, not only does he want to fill by making solar panels, it's just one of those things when people become dependent on the government for a paycheck, they'd much rather take the paycheck from government than actually go out and work for it. And that's natural human inclination. So the idea that this was unforeseeable is illogical. We saw this coming. And now it's even worse because what people don't understand is last year when these geniuses around the world determined what businesses were essential and which ones aren't, that was going to lead to a shortage of products that we're seeing today. Factor in that now these companies can't even get employees to make the products to change to make sure that there's enough supply on the market. The problem's only getting worse.
It's the screwiest thing in the world. If you have over 100 employees, they have to have the vaccination. If you don't have over 100, if you have 99, I guess you don't. And yet at the same time, and everybody knows this and everybody sees it, you have these thousands upon thousands of people coming across our open border. It is not closed as Mayorkas or Diorcus or Durkis or Dukakis or whatever his name is says it is. It's like,
but they're only coming in for a short period of time. I don't know if you listened to the press secretary, Jen Psaki, was asked a question on whether or not the migrants need to show vaccine passports or paperwork for vaccines. And she said, no, it's not required of them because they're only coming in for a short period of time. They traveled 3,000 miles, 3,000 miles, horrible, difficult terrain to grab a cup of coffee. Then they're going to go back home.
Well, the answer to that is they just came in to spread COVID.
Yeah.
Then they go back home.
But the idiocy of these people is truly astonishing that she would and she said it with a straight face. That was
they truly believe that the American people are stupid. They really do.
Well, listen, look at California. Maybe we are.
Well, you can't really look. That's an interesting thing you brought up because here's my take on that. I think the Democrats want to do to America what they've done to California. It's always as California goes, so goes the United States. I think it's their blueprint for taking over the country if they possibly can.
But this is what drives me nuts when I see all this going on, from the unfettered immigration to the draconian decrees when it comes to the coronavirus, to the whole unemployment situation. We see in real time the ineptness of government. We see the ineffectiveness of government, the defects, the inefficiencies of government, and yet people will willingly give government more power. You have a lot of talk about this idea of universal health care. We have a system that's set up where our federal government is separate from the state governments. It's a system called federalism, two levels of government that are independent of each other. If we want to try these programs, well, let California do universal health care. This way, if it fails, we don't screw it up for the other 49 states. Why do we have to kick it to the federal government? Same thing with migration. California talks about how we have to let everyone in. Listen, I'm all for compassion, but we grant citizenship to over 750,000 people a year. We grant green cards and permanent resident to over 1 million people a year. We grant refugee and asylum status to like 200,000 people a year. We house 25% of the world's immigrant population each year. Out of all the nations in the world, we have combined, we take on more than all the nations.
Are you saying that this racist, sexist, existential threats from the
white supremacists
from Republicans is like a lightning rod for these people around the world to come here?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like we see this and people are okay with it. No, here's the thing. You want to solve the migrant problem? Let's send them all to California. Let California deal with it.
I'd rather send them to Delaware and let them deal with it.
Well, them too. I would send them to the elite zip codes in the United States. Let the wealthy communities that have the money, the resources, and the capability to sustain these populations, let them take care of it. Mm-hmm. Because what's going to happen is we let in all these migrants. Mayorkas came out yesterday and said, no, these people, they're not they're going to be turned back. They're going to be turned away. That's a lie. They're not.
Well, they're lying just profusely every day.
Absolutely. And they're going to be sent to poor urban communities, poor suburban communities, that where the infrastructures are already crumbling, the education systems have already failed, where the people are really struggling in these communities, and it's only going to get worse. So why not send them to the elite zip codes?
What is behind this destruction of the nation while we build back better, supposedly? Because they're destroying the country. They're destroying everything about America that we know and love through so many different ways. I mean, climate change and immigration, illegal immigration. You just name it, one after another.
Well, that's a complicated question.
You're a complicated guy, so
that's true.
Make it simple for us.
Well, the thing is that we have various factions that are all pushing the same nonsense. So you have one faction that are just they're generally idealists. They're people that believe that America is a wealthy nation and we got to do what's right, that we need to take in anyone that comes here, they got to take care of them.
That's open borders. That's Soros.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the people that don't know all the ins and outs, the people that don't know the complexities, the people that are idealistic, the 18, right. 19, 20-year-olds that say that we have a moral obligation and a responsibility. Those people generally have good intent. They just don't realize the consequences. And I tell my students, I explain to them, I don't care what the policy is, whether you support the policy or not. Every single policy is going to have benefits and drawbacks. There are going to be consequences of every policy. There's going to be winners and losers of every policy. Unfortunately, this group we've oversimplified everything for them, that every issue is supposed to either be good or bad, and that's not the way it works. Then we kick it up a notch. Then you have the political powers that be. The ruling class elite, the political powers that be, they're doing it for power reasons. They understand that if the more migrants you have, you're not sending them into hardcore red suburban communities, but you are sending them to red states to go into their urban centers. And here's the key. A lot of people talk about, well, sooner or later, these immigrants are going to be legalized and they're going to vote and they're going to vote Democrat. That is not necessarily true. It's not about them necessarily voting Democrat. See, what happens is that some of these immigrants actually have conservative ideology. They may have came to the country illegally, but they do have conservative ideologies. If you look at many South Americans, they are extraordinarily religious. Some of them are hard workers. They believe in individual that you got to make your own money, take care of your family. You got to work hard. Here's the key. When it comes time to do the census, that's where it matters, because whether you're legal or not, it's bodies counted in the U.S. Census. It has nothing to do with U.S. citizens versus non-citizens. President Trump tried to change that. He tried to make it that only U.S. citizens get counted in the census. But no, it goes to the totality of people. And so you have these blue urban areas in red states where if you continually expand the populations,
you get another.
Well, you're getting congressional seats. I mean,
another congressional seat, right?
If we look at it, there's been estimated that 2 million people this year will legally be into the United States. There'll be migrants that come in through legal means because they're claiming asylum. They'll come in through legal means. They won't show up to their court date. Only 13% are. And that's when they become illegal. That's when they're considered illegal. So you have these people that will go, 2 million of them. That's 3 congressional seats right there. But it's actually worse than that, because we're pumping these 2 million into major urban centers. That's beefing up numbers where maybe you only need 150,000 in this urban center to gain another congressional seat. And it's the way that Democrats want to make the map blue. Start taking over by expanding their congressional delegations and make it impossible for Republicans to ever win back the House of Representatives and even the United States Senate. And so that's the second group. The third group is the bureaucratic class. They're extraordinarily dangerous because the bureaucratic class, along with some of the elitists in the corporate industries, they believe they know what's best for us. They believe
and they never leave. They're there forever.
Exactly.
Administrations come and go, but those guys never leave.
Exactly. But here's the thing. I mean, if you expand the amount of people we're taking in, nearly every government program also expands. And that makes job security. You're never going to lose your job. And so that's another reason. So you have all these different peoples with different motives that have the same goal, but they have different motives behind them, and it makes for an explosive situation. And no nation could survive a small city coming into their country each and every year.
I'm going to talk to you about H2 Max.
That puts everything in perspective.
It does put things in perspective because after all, is your body just not inflamed from these political debates?
Yes, it is. If H2 Max will fix that, I want some now.
So considering that H2 Max is a wonderful product to reduce the inflammation in your body, this would probably be a great time to have some H2 Max.
Yeah.
All kidding aside, folks, I want you to try this stuff. You can get it at h2max.com or buyh2max.com is actually the website, or Amazon. It's called H2 Max. It is molecular hydrogen. Now, we are not talking about the Hindenburg, so do not worry.
Yeah, right.
The humanity is safe. We're not going to blow anybody up. But hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe. It's what the sun is made out of. It's what our body's made out of. Our bodies need hydrogen. And hydrogen acts as a terrific molecule in our body to help reduce inflammation. Now, there's another thing to H2 Max, Chuck, that you probably don't know too, and that is most people, when they take it, kind of get an energy boost where they kind of feel like they had an energy drink or something.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and there's no caffeine and there's no drugs, so it's kind of a very natural little energy boost. So it's great just to feel good. It's great to get your mind thinking clearer. And it is great if you're dealing with stuff like back pain, sciatica, arthritis. So, folks, try it out. Let us know how you like it. It's H2 Max. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go to buyh2max.com.
There's two interesting things that are taking place, dynamics in the world. One is that we have about 100,000 Afghans who really don't deserve to be here. They didn't help our troops. They didn't do anything else. They're just Afghan citizens who got on an airplane to come here. They're having trouble. They can't vet them all. We know that. So they're going to turn them loose and spend $60 billion to resettle them. Can you imagine in the early times of this country when we were really trying to build population, Europeans were coming over. They were on their own.
Absolutely.
I mean, good luck.
But you don't even have to go to the founding of this country. If you look at
that wasn't the founding. That was in the 20s.
I was just going to say, if you look at the 1920s, the early teens, when you had the waves of Italians and Irish and all them coming over, it was you're on your own. I mean, even down to the 60s, you can go as far back as the 60s. You were on your own if you came here. And the mindset of immigrants has changed dramatically as well. So if we go back to
I have a idea about that. The Democrats have said for years and years, we need to be more like Europe. Well, Europe is a welfare continent. I mean, they operate on welfare. They have welfare systems for everybody. And that's what they want for us. They want everybody to be on welfare and dependent on the government. So that's what 100%. They're trying to install.
Well, it is to a certain degree, but when you look at the immigrant thing, it doesn't make any sense because if you know anything about European countries, I mean, you want to talk about discrimination and racism. Well, many Europeans don't like outsiders, and they express that on a daily basis. I mean, if you look at Italy, for instance, Italy, you have the politicians will be in debates. They'll openly use the N-word when it comes to the migrants coming from Africa. Like, if that ever happened here, that politician is dead in the water. They're done. They're never going to have.
I never knew that. I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. In Italy, it's bad. But because, once again, you're talking about a place where you have 3,000 years of a common culture, and now they see an outside threat to their culture. Whether rightly or wrongly, the Europeans are extraordinarily closed off in a sense. And
Germany's just been overrun by the Middle East. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. Well,
and Germany's doing it solely for productivity means. They're not doing it to make their country a better place. They're doing it for revenue. But if you look at many of the immigrant classes in the European societies, they're relegated to the slums. Their destiny is already foretold. Whereas here, your destiny is in your own hands. You can make it or not. But if you look at how immigration shifted, so in the 80s and 90s, you had men coming over. They were coming over illegally to work, to earn a living, and they'd start to develop roots here in the United States. At the time that they were working here in the United States illegally, the spouse and the children were applying for citizenship through legal means and coming to this country. After several years, almost a decade, finally, they would be able to come over because their paperwork would be approved. The men would already have roots here, an establishment here, and the assimilation process would take place. And then we started to see a shift in the 2000s, particularly in the 2010 and on, where entire families were now coming over illegally. It was no longer men that were coming here to work to make a better life and prepare to bring their families from their native lands here. Now it was entire families that were coming over. And this changed the mindset. Why were we now seeing entire families? Well, it's because we opened up the government roles to say that we have to basically take care of anyone and everyone. It used to be that if you're here illegally, you don't qualify for any benefits, period. If you're here legally, you qualify for benefits after a certain amount of years of putting into the system. But since we opened the rolls, now we have entire families where all these benefits are going out. $60 billion is an extraordinary amount of money.
It is.
Now, if we just take the Afghan refugees that we brought over, that's 100,000 Afghanis for 50 states. That means states are going to be taking thousands upon thousands of Afghanis.
They'll be going into the medical system. They'll be going into the school system. They'll be going into the welfare system. They'll be going into all the systems.
They're going to be going into all the systems, and then how a service is going to be degraded. We already have problems when it comes to ESL teachers with Hispanic populations, where we actually have Hispanic-speaking teachers. How many of teachers are now going to have to learn Pashto or some other Afghani language?
Something's very interesting, and I go back to when I lived in California, which has been a few years ago. But I remember they were trying to come up with a dual language for. They'd always had it. They taught in Spanish and they taught in English. And somewhere along the line, I don't know who was governor at that time. I don't think it was a Democrat. They decided that they were only going to use English, and people went crazy. Well, it worked. It was fine. Everybody learned English.
Well, if you want to look at the older generations that came here, and I know a lot about the Italian immigration because it's something that I've studied. When Italian immigrants came here, the immediate family members would still speak Italian to each other inside the home. Mm-hmm. However, they wouldn't teach their children Italian. And the reason they wouldn't teach their children Italian is because they wanted their children to appreciate this country that they're in. They wanted their children to learn and love the United States of America.
Assimilate.
But that's the amazing part, where you had this mindset that it was important to be American. And when these immigrants left their homes, no matter what their English was, it was very broken. It's very difficult sometimes to understand them. They still tried to speak English when they were outside their homes. So they wouldn't teach their children their native language. They wouldn't teach their grandchildren their native language, because it was very important to appreciate the United States. Then again, the mindset changed. The entitlement culture changed. Where now you have to cater to my language. Well, no society could survive if everyone's speaking in their own native tongues and we can't understand each other. And you go to a DMV or any government service, they have a whole placard of different languages that they could interpret. But it's insanity. And it makes it.
I don't think a lot of people really know that, but it's absolutely true, folks.
Oh, yeah.
When you deal with state governments who have various people from around the world, they put everything in their language. They'll have, whatever. I mean, everything. It'll just be hundreds of languages that ballots are, when you vote, it'll be on your ballot. If you're Afghan, then it'll be an Afghani or whatever you speak over there.
Correct. And think about how difficult it is today. So years ago, if you came to the United States, you were surrounded by American language. You're going to learn American sooner or later. You're going to learn the English language because television, when you go out, everyone's speaking English. So you have no choice.
I had so many people when I did television that said when I did Wheel of Fortune and even Love Connection, which, it was nothing like Word Game. They would come up to me and say, my children learned English by watching your show. Yeah. Because a lot of it was word games and things like that, and they wanted to watch, they wanted to understand, and so they slowly but surely adopted the language through a game show, which is astounding to me.
They learned 2 and 2, and, Lingo was great. When you were on Lingo, that was great. But when we're examining it, everything was you submerge yourself in the culture, you learn the culture. Just like if I go to Italy and I live there for 20 years, I'm going to pick up on the Italian language.
Sure.
But now the problem is, if I watch TV, I can find a channel that's in my native tongue. I don't have to learn English. I don't have to watch it in English. If I go on
Jerry Ferencio with Univision.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who's now passed away literally brought Univision in.
And but it's much more there's tons of Spanish stations now. There's Russian stations, there's Hindi stations, there's Italian stations that you could watch. If you go online, well, I don't have to learn English. I could just have it all in any language I want online. So they're not being surrounded by the English language, so they're never learning it. And if you're not picking up on the English language, are you picking up on the customs and the culture and the traditions of this country? And the answer is no, they're not. There's no assimilation.
When I was really active on Twitter, I would get responses from Chinese people in Chinese, Mandarin probably. I would get responses from people in the Middle East in their language. I mean, it was like as if I knew what they were talking about. I had no clue what they were talking about.
And that's what it has, the little C translation button. You could actually press that button and it will translate that tweet for you.
I never bothered.
See, I do, because I'm always interested to see what like the international audience actually thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're Chuck Woolery. You don't know your fan base outside America. It's huge.
It's hard enough to understand what the Americans are saying. And sometimes I'll tell you that.
That's true. And it's only going to get worse,
especially
because
on
we
Twitter
now have a system where, proper grammar is seen as white supremacy, where speaking properly is white supremacy, where
showing up on time is white supremacy. I mean,
these are all white social constructs, which I find extraordinarily offensive, especially if I am someone of a minority descent, that you're basically stating that we can't, being on time.
You can't adjust.
Is something that all black people, all Spanish people, all Asian people are going to be late or something? Like, no, being on time is a sign of respect. Exactly. It doesn't matter what culture, what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter what culture you go to. Show up 30 minutes late to a meeting with Japanese officials, they're going to be offended.
Back in the day, I was working for the Pillsbury Company, and I had a new boss who lived in West Virginia. I was in Ohio, and I had a tri-state area, big area that I use as my sales base. And every time he called me for a meeting, I was 20 minutes late, every time. And I had an excuse. There was traffic on the bridge. There was this. And finally, he said, look, after this meeting today, I want to talk to you. I said, okay. He said, if you're a minute late for me, I'm going to charge you $10 off your check. If you're 15 minutes later, you do the math. If you're 20 minutes later, it's going to be more, as you well know. This is what's going to happen if you don't have any more respect for me than to show up on time. So I started showing up 20 minutes early thinking I would get a raise.
But at least you didn't lose money.
You know what? It taught me a great lesson in I was very young, and it was a good lesson for me. Now I'm like Prussian. I'm on time as if I can possibly be, or I'll call you and let you know what's going on.
Well, and that's the thing. When you're young, you make mistakes. When you're young, you take advantage of situations. I explain to my students, I don't care if you get 90s, 100 on all the tests. I don't care if you get A's on your paper. If you're late to my class every day, you're failing my class. Why? Because it's the real world. And if you're late to work every day, you're going to get fired. So my class, you'll fail, because you have to learn that type of personal responsibility. Doesn't matter what the color of your skin is or what religion you follow or anything like that. It's a sign of respect.
Part of the conversation he had with me was this, which I found devastating and interesting at the same time. He said, you've been with this company 6 months. You're the number one salesman we have in this company. You've turned the territory around like nobody I've ever seen. Your performance is unbelievable, but that doesn't excuse you for being late. That doesn't excuse you for disrespecting my time.
Yeah. Well, but these are the important life lessons that particularly the younger generations need to hear, because they have this warped view that they could essentially do anything they want.
They're making it part of the culture if they possibly can. I mean, they're distorting the culture to a point where you don't even recognize it anymore.
Yeah, well, and there's no consequences. And they don't. Well, there are consequences. They just don't realize it. So when
there will be down the road for them, there'll be consequences.
Well, when they're in their job interview and they look at their cell phone, and then they didn't get the job, they're going to say it's unfair they didn't get the job, but it's because they looked at their cell phone. That, once again, these are just simple things that you're supposed to do. But we're not teaching children of today how to interact within society. And so not only are the American children having problems, now you factor in all the immigrant population coming into the society. And what are the customs, the values, the norms that are being taught? Well, we can't teach that anymore. Because if we teach customs, values, norms, appreciation, and love or respect of the United States and our culture and the American political philosophy, well, that's not fair, because then we're taking away from their heritage. We're taking away from their culture. We're taking away from their tradition. The leftist view, this cultural Marxist view that we have to get rid of the idea of assimilation, is going to destroy all nations.
We've gotten rid of the idea of assimilation. I mean, it's disappeared. It's gone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to respect Mark Levin. Whether you like him or not, you really got to respect him. I mean, he knows what's going on. He's seen what's happening with American Marxism, which is kind of like Marxism, but it's got a little different. It's Americanized, but it's still Marxism. And he sees it, and he's pointed a lot of these things out that we have to take our country back. I mean, we really do. And it's up to the individual citizen, because if you don't, you're just going to be, you're going to be lorded over by these autocrats who will tell you what to do all the time, and you're not going to have any freedoms.
Dermen Fragile Skin Moisturizing Lotion. So warm weather is going to be just around the corner here.
He is the master of transition.
Warm weather is going to be right around the corner, and that means you're going to be, going short sleeve shirts and showing off a little more skin. I know that you're big on
skin,
big on showing off a lot of skin.
Yeah, right.
So here's the thing with the moisturizing lotion. You'd see people will use face creams and Botox and fillers, but if you look at your neck or if you look at your hands, you can't hide your age, can you?
No, I can't hide mine anymore. I'm going to be 80 this month.
I know you are, and you can't go in and get a hand lift
like
you can get a facelift.
No.
Well, that's the stuff with Dermen. This stuff, I got to tell you, the before and afters on this stuff, especially on using like on your hands or on the décolletage, the area right, under your neck, has been phenomenal. And as you know, you like the Dermen products, because you like the Dermen Bruise formula and the anti-itch formula.
I like all their products. All their products are awesome.
They are great products. So, folks, if you want to make your hands look younger, or you have an itch, or you want to cover up bruises, not cover bruises, but actually heal bruises, Dermen, go try it. You can find it at CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, all kinds of fun places.
And so the question is, has the American population radically changed that much where what we see today is actually the majority of people support? Or is the American people, are we still that center-right country? We're just afraid to speak up. I don't know the answer to that.
I think that people are intimidated to speak up. I think they've been bullied by our press. I think they've been bullied culturally. I think they've been bullied by Hollywood. I think they've been bullied by the federal government. And when you watch MSNBC, read the New York Times, who come up with a nugget every now and then, or CNN or places like that, or even the majors, CBS, ABC, and NBC, you're looking at propaganda. I mean, they just propagandize. You're not going to get any news. So culturally, I think that's how they're holding on to their base, whatever that base is. And whether they'll expand it or not, I have no idea. But we are being lied to daily by our news organizations and our newspapers and magazines and things. It's amazing how the American people are just inundated with lies and expect to take it as the truth. I mean, we watched this today with the head of DHS, Department of Homeland, DHS. Yep. We've watched it with Joe Biden. I mean, it's amazing how they say. What did I see on MSNBC the other day? They said, well, Joe Biden has a lot of things that he's having to deal with that are very, very troubling, and they're crises, actually. And they actually said crises, which I thought was interesting. And he's got to deal with these things one at a time. And I thought to myself, Joe Biden is dealing with crises that he created himself.
100%.
I mean, this didn't happen to him. He's not a victim. He's the president of the United States.
And it was all foreseeable, too. It's not like these just came out of left field. Like ending the stay in Mexico policy, it was foreseeable what the consequences were going to be.
Now, I wonder, this is when I wonder if the American people look at this and go, okay, you may not have liked Trump's personality. You may not have liked his boldness, his brashness, his tweets, whatever, but he solved problems. And had he been in for another 4 years, they probably would have stayed solved. And these politicians, Biden and this administration, I mean, look, they're mostly far left anyway. They don't like the country. They don't like the American people, but they will serve them up anything they can to keep them on their side. But they don't solve problems. They just talk about problems and they run on problems. And the thing they hated about Trump, I think more than any single thing, was he came in and exposed the fact that, yes, you can solve the problem. The border isn't broken. The government's broken.
Yeah. Absolutely, especially when we're paying other countries to actually build a border wall in their countries like Jordan and Egypt and, all these other places. But something you said is critical there. You look at the politicians. Something changed within our culture. It used to be about actions, that we pay attention to actions. And then something shifted, and now it became about words, that it became about language and how a president conducts himself. President Trump gets this rap that he's a narcissist. Every president's a narcissist in some way. Then you look at the idea.
Every politician is a narcissist in some way. Let's
100%. But then you look at, the idea that, look at President Trump. He's immoral and all this stuff. Okay, Bill Clinton, really? We're going to talk about morality?
That's always a false flag.
But even JFK, JFK is memorialized as the amazing president and a great leader. And he was a good leader to a certain degree. But at the same time, he also had numerous affairs with numerous amounts of women. He was addicted to painkillers. He was an alcoholic. He had ties to the mob. You look at FDR, same thing. He was philandering all around with other women and everything. Like, it's not like I elect my politicians based on the idea that they're morally sound. I elect my politicians based on the idea that they're going to do what they say, and those policies are going to work in my self-interest. That's how I elect them. Unfortunately, we got a whole society right now that says, well, we don't want a mean person as president. We don't want.
Exactly.
And I sit there, I'm like, do you see the international community? Do you see these other countries? Sometimes having an a-hole as president is a pretty good idea. I'd rather a mob boss as president than what we're seeing when you get
Trump always said,
Biden.
I would rather have the, people in other lands, so to speak, fear me instead of love me. It's easy to get them to love you. All you got to do is go along with them. They'll love you for that. But when you stand up against them and what you think is wrong and right for America, they hate you for it. But they respect you eventually because they know you won't come off that mark.
100%. And it's not like, when we say this idea about the world loving us. No, the world doesn't love Biden. The foreign leaders don't love Biden. They're happy with the fact that they have someone that they can now manipulate to get policies that are in their self-interest, because nations operate within their self-interest. So it's not like they
Trump
even
was
love
pillared
him.
for even saying that.
But that's the stupidity of the world that we're living in. I mean, human beings, we're the ones that make up government, right? We're the ones that govern politics and international relations. Human nature is that I'm going to do things that are in my self-interest. That's human nature. I'm going to do what's in myself, not my neighbor's self-interest. I'm going to do what's in my self-interest and my children's self-interest. And hopefully at the same time, it benefits the community as a whole.
And when you do something in someone else's self-interest, that's called sacrificing your self-interest.
Exactly. And I'm not going to sacrifice my self-interest for other people. I'm not Mother Teresa over here. I'm readily going to admit that. The Mother Teresas are few and far between. Well, since we make up government, we bring those same attributes. As a country, we're supposed to do what's in our self-interest. Yet we have a whole bunch of politicians who took an oath to serve the American people that just disregard the American people, and they're actually serving others that aren't American citizens, putting them ahead of the ones that they swore to serve. And so the system's broken. And then you have feckless Republicans where are they? I mean, you have fires all over the place. All right, Rand Paul, give Senator Rand Paul all the credit in the world. He's constantly speaking out. You got Ted Cruz, you got Holly Cotton to a certain degree. But where are the vast majority of Republicans not only speaking out, but taking on the leftist media, going on their programs and calling them out on their air, exposing what's really true, taking on the Democrat narrative? Instead, Republicans sit there and they just say no.
So let me ask you something that's very interesting, but it brings up a point. And the point is, why? Why do they do that? What is in their self-interest that makes them do that, to act that way?
Two reasons. One, you have the establishment class. The establishment class just wants to keep the gravy trains flowing.
Go along.
They just want to go along, get along. They want to make sure they get reelected, that they could, rub shoulders with the elite within society. And so they don't want to speak up, because if you speak up, if you tend to rock the boat, you have a greater chance of being thrown out of office, and you're not going to get the party backing support and all that stuff. So you have the establishment class that just ignores it and doesn't fight back, because they don't really care in the end. They care about themselves, but they don't care the direction that this country goes as long as they have their positions.
No, they're party guys. They care about the party more than they care about themselves.
Correct. And then you have other Republicans that are afraid. They're afraid of how they're going to be labeled. They're deathly afraid of being called a racist. They're afraid of being called a bigot, a misogynist, and they're afraid to speak up. And so they remain silent, or they'll just toe a certain narrative because they don't want to be criticized. They don't want the blowback, and they're cowards. If you're in office and you're not willing to speak up and speak out and actually represent me, then what the hell are you doing there? Get out. And I want someone that's going to do that. The final group that you have are ones that are just idiots. They don't know how to strategize properly. And so just to go to the California recall for a second, the California recall was a great example of what Republicans should have done. Now, in general elections, Republicans have to sit there. They have to defend certain areas. They have to try and go into purple areas to win those areas over. And so they ignore states like New York, states like California, because they have no shot. They have absolutely no shot at winning them. And so they ignore these places. Why waste time, money, and resources? But you're never going to win over anyone in these places if you don't waste time, money, and resources and actually speak to them. So the California recall was the perfect opportunity, where it was the only race in the country where you could have thrown every single resource that you have at it. Give Larry Elder all these different surrogates to go into all these areas that you've long ignored to try and start winning people over. And the Republicans didn't do that. They said, we don't want to waste money in California. Larry Elder doesn't have a shot. And Larry Elder, who I respect immensely, he also didn't have the best argument for Californians as well. Gavin Newsom made it all about, this is another version of President Trump. Larry Elder's a hardcore conservative. He's going to take away your abortion rights. And
he's a black face of white supremacy.
Correct. If I was advising Larry Elder, what I would have told him, the way to campaign is campaign on the idea that California has had a unified government of Democrats for decades, that there's not a single thing Republicans could do to stop anything they want. And that you, as governor, the only thing you want to do is stop the bleeding for California. That as governor of California, you're still going to have a Democrat legislative branch. So it's not like, as someone that's a conservative, I'm going to be able to jam through all these hardcore conservative principles. So you don't have to worry about your abortion and the arguments there. What I want to do is stop the bleeding in California and return some normalcy to California. But instead, it became about, the boogeyman. Republicans are going to take this away from you. They're going to take away your rights. They're going to take away your social welfare programs. They're going to make your life more difficult. And Republicans never have an effective response to that.
Well, they do. They just never use it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. They never respond effectively.
Exactly.
To it.
Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, what you hear on television today is, as a distraction, is how these people are just totally exercised over the Texas abortion law. I mean, you would think it's the end of the world.
Well, you would think that there's no other issue out there.
I mean, really, it's amazing.
Well, what amazes me, because once again, Americans tend to put emotion into all policies.
This is something that goes back to the founding fathers. They knew this.
The emotion clouds judgments. The emotion, it taints you, and you can't look at a policy objectively. First of all, when it comes to abortion, I'm someone that's a big believer in state rights. States are the ones that get to determine abortion policy. I believe in state rights with everything. And then when we look at abortion, let's just think about it logically. Let's just say humanity ends tomorrow, that we cease to exist. And beings come here 1,000 years from now. They find out that we do these abortion practices. Do you think that they're going to look at us as enlightened, sophisticated people, or do you think they're going to look at us as savages?
Oh, I think savages.
And that's the thing. When it comes to the whole abortion debate, leave it up to the states. That's the way it should be. And the idea that you're losing your rights, well, be more responsible. At what point do we say the individual bears some responsibility for their own actions?
When the elections come along in Texas next time, people will speak out, whether they like it or not, and they will elect the people that they decide made the right decisions. It's that simple.
And here is where Republicans fail. And here's what concerns me. Democrats are going to use the abortion law in Texas as a rallying cry. And for some reason, I don't know why, but there's a lot of people that just get tunnel vision. They're like one-issue voters.
Right.
And they're going to try and galvanize all these Democrats in a red state because of this Texas abortion law. And the Democrats will turn out. They will vote. Republicans, on the other hand, many of them are supporters of the abortion law. that Texas passed, and you have conservatives that actually wanted to see it go a little further, but they're still supportive of it. But there's no urgency to get to the polls. See, they'll be like we won. We got what we wanted. We got this abortion restriction put in place, and so now we're good. So there's no urgency to go to the polls. Where Democrats are already organizing, they're already getting ready, and they will turn out to the polls based on this one particular policy.
You know, when we get to our next show, Nick, you're going to be with us again, and I'm happy for that. Let's talk about what's happening with Hillary Clinton and what's going on with that whole thing, how that's unfolding. It's going to be very interesting to see how this Durham exposes what's happening in our government, what had happened, and what happened with the other election. Would you be willing to talk about that?
Absolutely, because it's more dangerous, more nefarious than people could imagine. And it's all tied together with what General Milley did and IRS targeting Tea Party groups. All this is all tied together. It's the biggest threat we face that nobody's paying attention to.
So that's what we're going to talk about next time, folks. In the meantime, thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on Blunt Force Truth.
Thank you for listening to the PAS Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASReport.com and follow us on Twitter @PAS Report.